Now I've cleaned my Pages panel out, so I'm back where we started, and we can actually get this assignment going. We can get some content in here and start producing a layout. Now the layout we're going to be producing is this one that you were provided with. I'm going to point out a few things on this quickly. Now you're seeing the document that in the sizing down here in the left corner it says 9.08 by 11.58. And we did this on an 8.5 by 11. Now that sizing is simply what it is so that you're not misled, because it's including that we're seeing what's called the crop marks here. So these crop marks are something that we include, and we'll talk further about that later. However, what they're indicating is where that trim happens. So if we were to print this out and simply take a ruler and an X-Acto knife to it and cut across where these lines are, that would end up trimming away our excess, the items that have been bled on here, and it would end up being that true 8.5 by 11. So those are the crop marks up in the corner. There's nothing wrong, and you're going to be including those on your document as well. And we've got an image here, a text frame up above the content here, so the text frame is on the image, and we have the content here in what we call two-column layout, and then this is actually in that text frame as well, and it's spanning those two columns. The credit information is spanning those two columns. Then we have a shape, just a rectangle that's been given a color that would have been sampled from this layout. So it's a very basic layout, and from the standpoint of a new user, I can understand why it may not appear as basic. Therefore, we're not going to focus on it being basic. We're going to focus on this being a challenge, because when we are new to this, there's a lot going on that can simply be challenging, obviously. One other thing that I didn't mention was here, this is another image, and what's being done here is what's called a text wrap. So we're going to work through building this, and as you build it, the best thing to do is consider going from the big picture down into the details, getting your content in and then laying it out. The idea of this exercise is to replicate this layout. It doesn't have to be 100% to the pixel exact. The concern with this is that you, of course, learn the basic tools, and this really is a great exercise in order to learn basic and very commonly used tools, specifically when you're designing something like magazine editorials and content and so on. So the first thing I'm going to do, because this is something that we're replicating, I'm going to go back into InDesign, and I'm going to place that file, that reference into my document. So I'm going to just move things over a bit here using my space, click and drag, and I'm going to go to File and Place. I'm going to track down that document. So here's the exercise finished. Now what I'm doing, I went to File and Place. And when we bring items into InDesign, we place them in. And the reason for that is because what it's going to do is actually maintain a link to this item. I'll explain that a bit further in a moment. So File, Place, and I'm choosing the PDF of this, and I'll say Open. And it's going to give me a little thumbnail. And when I click, that's where it will place. I'm going to place it over here on the pasteboard. So you can see it doesn't have any white behind it. I'll zoom out, space, command, option, and click. It doesn't have any white behind it because, as we saw earlier, the white is the paper. Now this type had been colored white, so that we could see it over top of the image. In print, it would get knocked through to the paper, but there was no background. So what we can do is put a background on this. Now, if you're working on a laptop, this can become a little more difficult because you don't have a whole lot of screen space, and I understand that. And I'm going to zoom out here and explain a couple more things. You have to bear with me because learning InDesign, there's always just so much to explain at first, and we'll soon be able to get over that hump. But even I've got not a really big pasteboard here, so that's okay. I'm going to work around that. But what I want to do is get some white in behind this. And I'm also going to talk about why everything's looking fuzzy. You may have brought it in, you're like, why is it so fuzzy looking? So we'll talk about that in a moment. I'm going to go to my shape tool here, the rectangle tool. Click on that. And if you hold that down, actually, you'll see that there's other tools. Ellipses, that's how we make circles. Polygon tool, you may want to play with that eventually, but we're not going to worry about that right now. I'm just going to use the rectangle tool. And I'm going to go to my crop marks here, and I'll show you where I'm doing that. I'm going to go right to the crops like that, and I'm going to draw a box that's actually going to reflect my true page. And either way, all I'm really trying to do is get a white box behind. So I'll zoom out. So I drew a box, if you can see that from the corners of the crops there, and that page should be approximately 8.5 by 11, that box, and up here we can see it is a little slightly slightly off, but that's okay. And then I'm going to color that in white. Now when I go up to the top here, you can see I drew something, and this is giving me the information about the item I drew. It also has the color, and in these boxes it has the color, as the fill, and as the stroke. The stroke is the outline, the fill is the color of the box itself, the full content of it. So I'm going to go to the fill there, and I'll choose paper. So I want to fill it in white. Now, of course, it's covering that, and that's fine for a moment. So I've filled it in white. I don't want a stroke. I don't want to just do an outline on it. So I can leave that at none, and that's what that red line indicates. So I filled it in white, and now I'll go back. I'm done using that tool. I'm going to go back to my selection tool, defaulting back. This is still selected, and even if it wasn't, I can select on it, and I'm going to send that to the back. Now I right-clicked, or I can have it selected and go to Object and Arrange. I do it by key commands, but you don't have to learn that one yet. And I'll go to Arrange and Send to Back. If I sent backward, it would go to the back because there's only two items on the page, the image that we brought in and my white box, but I'm just going to send to the back. And this is the key command I typically use, Command Shift and my left square bracket. So we're often arranging, we're using that arrange tool to send items forward and backward, above and beneath one another. So if I were to move this, only what I click on would move. I'm going to undo that, Command Z. So I want to group these. So I'll click and drag across both, and I'm going to go to Object and Group, or Command G. And now when I move them, they'll move together. And the reason I'm doing that is so not only that I can see my document correctly, but I can move it all out of the way. I can bring it back if I want. I'm going to try to maintain the same size. I could scale this down if I want, but I want to maintain the same size because I want to do an accurate replication. Now, I even want to get this lined up with my page, so I'm going to bring that crop mark down to match with my page, my actual document page. And quite honestly, if you can get this far, if you can get the white box in behind the placed PDF and get them grouped and get them lined up to your page, you're doing great. Honestly, that's how annoying this program can be when you're first learning it. And I always say, make every project many small jobs, and you'll find that it's just a lot less overwhelming. And your first job is to get this PDF placed in, going to File, Place, and getting the white box using your shape tool, getting the box drawn from the tips of the crop marks to right across to the other crop marks. However you do it, I usually do from the left, top left down, and getting that colored white. So you had the box selected and you went up to the fill and you chose paper, which means white. And then we grouped those. We grouped the placed file with the box. Now, one final thing in that before we can move on to our actual document is this looks quite fuzzy. When we placed it in, it doesn't look as nice as it does in the PDF itself. In this PDF, if we zoom in, it's actually quite high resolution, that image. So we want to make sure that we're seeing that correctly. Most of our computers can handle showing this in high resolution, but I'll explain what's happening. InDesign is always linking out to whatever we've placed in. We placed this in. It's not embedded in the program, it's linked out to it. And when it does that, if we're working on a large book or a magazine, it may be linking out to even hundreds of images, which can really slow the program down. So it's giving us a very basic preview of what we've placed in. And it's showing it in as low resolution as it can, but making it visible. And that's allowing things to run as fast as possible. Well, because we're typically working on stronger computers and we only have a single page document here, we can get away with viewing this in high resolution. Now, there's two aspects of that in InDesign. If we go to View, this is going to pertain to the entire document. So I go to View and Display Performance, and I can turn on High Quality Display. And that is pertaining to anything that we do in this document. It will show in high quality. Now I'm going to undo that for a moment. You can leave yours. So I'll go back to typical. Now if I went to Object and I go down to Display Performance, it doesn't give me the option because this is object specific. So I'll click on the object and then I'll go down to Display Performance and High Quality Display, and now that's pertaining to that object strictly. Now if I bring in another image, that other image will come into whatever my document is set at for display performance, which is typical display. Now I'm going to change this back to high quality display because I know that this document can handle it, this computer can handle it. However, it's one of those things that often defaults. When you turn InDesign on, it defaults back to typical or low quality, and you wonder why everything's fuzzy. So just know that for your document, going to View and Display Performance and turning on High Quality Display, trusting that you're using high quality imagery, it will show it nicely. And then if you just want to do that to one object, you'll select the object and go down to Display Performance in the Object menu.